Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Jakarta Tech Talk. My name is Serena, and joining us today is Karina Varela with solid experience in architecting and delivering software. Currently works at Red Hat and has special interests in business automation and business DevOps. Also with us today is Otavio Santana, who's passionate software engineer focused on cloud and Java technologies. He has experience mainly in persistence, polyglot, and high performance application in finances, social media, and e-commerce. If you have any questions for Karina or Octavio as we go through today's presentation, feel free to ask them in the chat or use the Ask a Question tab. Before we get started, there is a 2022 Jakarta EE developer survey that is open. So I just linked it in the chat earlier, about a couple of minutes ago. So feel free to go into that survey afterwards and complete it. Without any further delay, Karina, Otavio, over to you.
Hello,
Awesome.
everyone. That's awesome. Hello, Karina. How are you today?
Hello, and thank you for having us here, Serena.
Yes, thank
So,
you.
yeah, I'm sharing my screen now. Hello, Otavio. It's so good to be here with everyone that's attending. Thank you so much for being here with us today. So, Otavio, today we are going to talk about the 5 skills that software engineers need to know in order to be outstanding.
Whoa,
So,
that's awesome.
yes, exactly. So, let me first get started by introducing our amazing speaker, who's Otavio Santana. He is not only a Java champion, but he has also several other awards out there, like the Dukes Champion and many others. He also contributes directly to the evolution of Java. So he's a leader, an expert leader of several working groups in the specification, in different specifications. Also, the creator, actually the top contributor and the creator of Jakarta NoSQL specification. Also, he's an Apache committer, Eclipse committer. He's part of the Eclipse. He's a project leader at the Eclipse Foundation. And he likes to use his free time to not only read, but also write and share his knowledge through several books. You can see it in his site, at his website, and also in blogs around the different options over there, like this one and InfoQ and many others. So it's a pleasure to be here
Whoa.
with you. What up, you?
No, the pleasure is totally mine, especially because I will talk with Karina Varela, who is Principal Technical Marketing Manager at the biggest open source company in the world. Yes, exactly. I'm talking about Red Hat. She has over 10 years of experience. She drives several communities such as SoJava, and knowledge is everything key. She is also instructor. She writes book and articles, especially and mainly about automation, cloud, Java architecture, and yeah, we have a huge pleasure to write a book together. But today's not to talk about us, Karina, right?
Indeed, today is to share some of the secrets that we learned over these several years of experience that we have together, and share with the audience here. So, tell me, what is the secret to succeed in an IT technical career? Some might say it is to have excellent knowledge on technical skills. Let's say I need to know a lot about cloud. I need to know a lot about programming. Some others might say, yeah, it's that's only that is not enough. You also need soft skills. So what's in for that, Otavio, in your opinion?
Well, it's a large discussion, right? How can you succeed? But first, how to define successful?
Exactly. How can we know
Exactly.
how to be successful if we don't even know what it is for what is meant for us to be successful? What does it mean,
Yes.
right?
Mainly because to everyone, successful has a different meaning. So it might mean something to me, it might mean something to you. For example, there are a lot of people who wants to be a manager. It is their
Exactly.
dream. There are people who loves to do code like me. Yes. And there are people who loves to do more open source or have more flexibility or have more time with the family. So everybody has your own definition about successful and also happiness. right?
Oops, let me close this. Just a second. Okay.
And
Yes,
but
exactly.
anyway, okay. But anyway, what matters to us is to you have a good career, you should, or at least you must have skills, right? Can you tell us about these skills, Karina, to us?
Exactly. So there are two types of skills. We are just getting started with the basics. Okay. So there are two types of skills. There are the hard skills and there are the soft skills. And I've known several consultants that were pretty good, like really good in what they did. They had several certifications. They had several courses. They could do like an exceptional job, technically speaking. But they these type of people, and I personally know a couple of them, they always had complaints when they were at customers because of the lack of soft skills. So when we are talking about hard skills, we are talking about, can you actually do, like, get your hands dirty and implement that, either if it is on programming or infrastructure, or in any level, middleware management. So all of these are the hard skills. Okay. So when we are talking about soft skills, on the other hand, we are talking about something that is more fluid, right? We need to be adaptable like water.
Like communication.
What is that phrase, Otavio, from Mandela that you like a lot? I really love that one when talking about communication.
Yeah, especially because also talk about communication, you need to think about language. And a language might be a barrier. For example, we are from Brazil, and there are a lot of people who does not speak English. And Nelson Mandela usually said that if you want to take people minds, you are able to speak English because right now is the most popular language around the world. But if you want to touch people hearts, go to their natural language. So if you are able to, besides English, speak Spanish, French, German, Chinese, something like that, it's much better to you because
And we will get deeper on this topic, I think, later on. But that was just an introduction, because only understanding your own native language and might not be enough. That's one of the things in the communication. There's also, if you can communicate to upper management or people that is under the hierarchy. So there's many skills that you can have there, including problem solving, conflict resolution. So there's several. If we could highlight five, we would say that the five top soft skills that you should prioritize if you need to work on those would be knowledge sharing, knowledge acquirement. So learning how to study by yourself, not having to go through several courses in order to get there where you actually need, and actually getting your hands dirty might be a good thing. Also, ability to have focus, to communicate, handle your time, that's critical, and know how to set your objectives. So these would be the five we would prioritize, right, Otavio?
yes, and that is a spoiler alert, especially because we already did this presentation last year, so probably it is online somewhere, mainly in YouTube.
Exactly. But
And
like again, about being successful, there are many options out there, and maybe you don't need to be a distinguished engineer, for example, in order to be successful in your personal concept. You might want to go to the project management side or to people management and many others, right?
yes, and especially because, for example, okay, I want to go deep in code, so even the developers, you you might go to do operation side so you can become a platform engineer or SRE, use the DevOps structure or something like that, or we want to go to principal engineer in the architecture design style, or you can go deep in just one language or one framework. So even the technical area, there are a couple ways where you're able to go. So database, NoSQL, SQL, new SQL, cache, distributed cache, data grid. there are thousands of options where you can specialize yourself. But
Otávio, yeah,
besides
go
the
ahead.
technical area, there are a lot of things that's related to technology. However, it's not exactly technology like code. For example, SSD depends on several physical aspects. That is technical writing. That is developer advocate. So I mean, a thousand options to you go through your career.
Otávio, but there's a myth that I would like to see if it is real or if we can just tag it as busted, because people say that if you go for this specific career or that other career, you might get some more money or less money. So how about that?
Yes, I mean, in the past, yes, it's true. I mean, usually the manager received more money than the engineer. However, right now the software engineer become more complex. There is a huge complexity in the area, and also there is the Y career where you can go through uh, technical area. Because in the past, okay, you become senior. There is no another way. You must go through engineer manager. However, right now, no, you're able to go to staff engineer, you're able to go to principal engineer, distinguished engineer, fellow engineer. And right now, it depends. For example, Cristiano Ronaldo, who is engineer, deliver a code or goals, receives more salary than this code, where I don't remember the name exactly right now.
Okay, so I think this is a good introduction. So this was
Let's
we are going
start.
to get started, but we just wanted to settle that there are different skills, and that not necessarily because you're going to one career or the other that you will get more or less money. I mean, let's get started, Otavio. So the first thing you need to know as a technical person is that everything has a trade-off. Okay, you might have heard it in the
Oh.
past, but you need to understand that it's literally everything.
Well, it's hard to understand, right? Especially because at this moment, every I guess a lot of people who is tech influencer is crying. But unfortunately, the truth is um, everything has a trade-off. So yes, microservice is wonderful. However, microservice are is not to everybody or is not to all the time. There's something happening with Kubernetes and so on. So there is these amazing books by Michael Richard and Neil Ford, and it has these amazing codes that explains about the software architecture right now. And basically, the main idea is there's no right answers. We need to understand first the context and then the trade-off. Mainly right now, when you want to become a staff, principal, and distinguished, you need to understand that is no right answer. You need to understand the trade-off. You need to measure the trade-off to create components to integrate that to us.
Exactly. So a way to think in order to like you shouldn't what do we want to what do we mean with this? So you shouldn't always go with this because maybe this thing that you hold on to is not always the right answer. So always Kubernetes, always microservice, always event driven, always whatever you have in your head. That might not be the case. So be pragmatic and incremental.
Yes, be incremental, you also be agile, right? So you do step by step, deliver small steps, and then for one.
Exactly. So
And
a good way to represent this, and everybody knows about this because it's been a while, been around for a while now, is that people were, at first everybody was microservice, microservice, and now they say, well, if you're gonna get started, maybe you should start with a monolith and then break it down. So that's one of the practical examples out there.
and Karina, the next one is about why. Why should I start with why? I mean, code is so exciting. I mean, it's amazing to put microservices in everything with cloud native, with Kubernetes and GitHubs. Because as an engineer, I love to put buzzword buzzword inside my technology, in my architecture.
Exactly. So generally we have to, so exactly that's not what you should do. Because there are three main things when we are talking about software. We need to know like why we are doing it, how we are going to do it, and what are we going to use when doing it. So I'm bringing this from the Synex Golden Circle. This is used a lot for selling and marketing of big organizations, when he says that the core thing that we need to know is the why, not the what. I don't care if you're going to use Java to implement your software. First, why are you doing that feature? Like, do you understand the business requirements there? Have you spoken to the business people to understand, especially if you're a software architect? Have you spoken to them and really understood, like deep down, what is the purpose of that software? Maybe what they are asking in the end of the day, or what's been written down and passed over to you, isn't the actual thing that needs to be delivered, you see? So depending on why you are creating that, you might think better on the how you are going to design it and architect it. And only then you can think about the what. In other words, what are you going to use? Like what the graspable things, right? The technical stuff. So which technologies and which architecture designs you're going to use there.
Yes, and that's a good point, right? Especially because every time, every presentation has an amazing success case with several tech influencers to say you must use that because that is awesome. Success case, and then the result, guess what? They deploy, you be failure. You put a huge complexity inside the code, inside the architecture. And as I said before, so if you go in the second line of any kind of architecture or any kind of decision, you are able to understand that first, that it is an amazing book, the 97 things every college engineer should know. There is one amazing chapter about, okay, it's okay if you're not running Kubernetes. It's not mandatory to use Kubernetes in everything. And probably you know Sam Neiman, who wrote several books mainly about microservices, especially those two, the most popular one. And he wrote an article about should I use microservices at beginning. And as he said, you need to understand first the why, and then go to the how. Okay, especially because they highlight the commentation to him is okay. If I will start a startup, it does not make sense to release an MVP a huge amount of complexity. I mean, just because Netflix has 1,000 requests by second, it does not mean that you will start your application with these numbers.
Exactly. And that applies also to digital transformation and the cloud journey. For example, many people look at the journey that other companies has taken, and they might target a similar place and not understand that maybe that's not the next step to be taken into their corporation. So hello, Francesca. So,
Hello,
and guys, we're
Francesca.
following up just the chat. Okay, so if you have anything you want to comment, just feel free to drop it down. And so that, yeah. And when we're talking about these adoptions, we need to understand that, okay, I know that I want to get there. Let's say I want to be the best. I want to have the best architecture. My business teams, my CEOs, they are all aligned with this. But how can I get there, right? In order to know how to get there, you need to understand where you are. And where you are doesn't only mean that you will map the technology landscape. It also means that you need to map the skill set in your teams that will handle that across the corporation. So you might even need to do a reorg and break your team into smaller groups, depending on the goals that you have, or get them together. We don't know. Maybe change the way your project managers lead and manage their projects. So all of these might require big changes. So it's not only about adopting a new technology. If you go that path, you might take a step that is longer that you can handle, and you might end up falling. So let's go to the third topic, third skill.
Oh
Oh my
yes,
gosh,
I
Otávio,
hate this
I
one.
am a pro in Kubernetes. I need to learn Kubernetes. I need to learn it and be a pro on that, because that's what's in, that's what's hype. So is that the way to go?
Yes,
Like,
because
I am a pro on Spring. I am a super Spring developer.
yes, I mean I'm amazing developers, but who cares about clean code? I know the framework, but I don't understand everything about P design partner, clean code, TDD, whatever. I don't care. The main point is about the framework.
Yeah, so
And
there's an interesting thing that I learned from my own experience, actually, that coincidentally and luckily, I started learning things through the specification, things that were based on specification. So I had a long path in my career working with Java server applications, and I learned the concepts there. Okay, so I could learn exactly which were the concepts. So what are the data sources, how you can configure them, what does a Java application has to have in order to interact with those things. So I kind of got a better expertise on a specific Java server. One day I had to start working with another one and then do a migration with another one. And guess what? I already knew how to work with all of those because all the concepts were the same. It didn't matter which application server I was working with because all the concepts were the same. So I only had to change the way you interact with it, but in the end of the day, you already know what's going on, right? The same is valid for programming, for example. So if you know, like Otávio said, concepts of programming, it doesn't matter if you are working with a specific language. If you switch, you might have to learn specific things of that language and the syntax, but you know the main thing that is actually going to bring it to allow you to create performant applications.
oh, nice. And especially because the approach, the upskill, the concept makes sense, right? I mean, there is the paradigms, for example, imperative, declarative, object, parallel processing, functional, database, data flow. In
Exactly.
every
Otávio,
situation,
on the database side, do you think it is the same? So if you learn the basic concepts, fundamentals of database, will you be okay working with anything? Relational, NoSQL.
yes,
So how's that in that
exactly.
world?
Especially because, for example, in database, data persistence, there is the CAP theorem, right? And that says about the words not perfect. You have three behaviors: consistency, availability, and fault tolerance. And you need to choose at least two of those options. What does that mean? So if you're gonna use either SQL or no SQL, you will follow the theorem until now. I'm gonna use I don't know, MongoDB. Yes, it has the CAP theorem. MySQL, it has the CAP theorem. You have the same goal to store information in distributed way. So it will follow this theory. And it's exactly happened with Java and Kotlin, right? Both are object oriented.
All right. So complexity is killing software developers. Why is that, Otávio?
Especially because right now, at least it's my feeling, right, Karina? So let's share ideas. We are putting technologies, you are putting frameworks where we have no idea why. Just because we saw an article, and I'm not complaining about conference. Look, right now we are doing conference. We are doing
Yeah.
articles. We write books, several books, but it does not mean that just because you saw an article about this, you must put that in production. Remember, first understand why, the context, and then how. If you put the technology just because you saw in a conference with hello world and uh, then put in production, trust me, a hello world is simpler than a distributed data system. So a presentation is much easier than the code in production.
Yeah, so
And
Max asks the question like, so is it better to choose the specification over the framework library product? I think that the point here that we are trying to bring is that it's better for you and your career if you learn the fundamentals and the concepts behind the framework. So a great example is for people who start learning how to persist in databases using Hibernate, for example, but they never actually tried to open a connection like manually and see how things work. So they will never be able to actually understand when they have a connection leak, for example, when they are having slow databases, slow queries that are because of auto-generated queries. So there are several things that if you understand the core concepts, that will be better. So that's what we are trying to highlight. On the other hand, now regarding the question, would you like to share your thoughts on this, Otavio? Do you have a hard opinion on this? I am a strong believer that we should go with things that follows the specs, because then you are free from vendor locking. What are your thoughts on this, Otavio?
specification is a Java word. I guess we have several discussion around that because specification is not about popularity; it's about standards. So usually, specification has a strong knowledge of computer science, of software engineer, right? And usually, specification is about taking a look in several implementations, take a look at the market, then compare, understand, create a context, and then apply as an implementation. If IT, you'd be something like, I don't know, some different area, this specification might be a mastership or doctorship to academy because there is a huge study. We take a look in several specifications, several companies. So if better if you choose specification, it depends of the context, right? Because there's no right and wrong answers. But if you should understand the specification, especially the computer science and the software engineer behind that, yes. If you want to become a principal engineer, distinguished engineer, fellow engineer, staff engineer, whatever, yes, you need to understand what's going on behind. So, for example, uh, what happened with Java because safe memory? It'll be cool if you understand that there is a garbage collector inside doing something. Uh, it will be cool. Okay, I don't know if you're gonna use Java with Spring or Java with Quarkus or Java with microprofile. However, both are object oriented. So it doesn't matter which one gonna use, but you follow the solid principles. You must to go through these design codes. So to make your
Exactly.
life easier and also your colleague easier to understand your code.
And also, Otavio, there's something more to this, because if you look at the specs, okay, there are frameworks and libraries that implement these specs. Uh, some of them go a little, they add extra stuff to that spec. Do you know what's extra there? So this is the kind of thing that differentiates the more senior people who are able to make decisions from those who are only using this stuff without knowing what's going on there. See? So another example also is when you are choosing frameworks for persistence and you see several options out there, including Panache. Oh my gosh, Panache is great. You don't need to do anything. You just put some annotations here and bam. Okay, do you know what is the active record? Do you know what's coming on Java for active record? Do you know what that framework requires you to do? For example, setting your attributes as public. Which principles does that break? Is it harmful for your architecture? So there are a couple of things that only from this perspective you're able to analyze and judge if that software or library or technology is suitable for your scenario. Do
Yes,
you want to add
and
anything? Go ahead, Otavio.
especially because there's several good points if you go to specification, right? For example, right now here we are in the Jakarta channel, and yes, if you don't know about Jakarta, please take a look in the website jakarta.ee, where you are able with a single API, you can go through several implementations, and that's amazing, right? Because I can use Payara, I can use Apache Tommy, I can use Wildfly, Quarkus, just using a single annotations. So the same annotation, I'm able to use the exact same ones. So it's amazing to use specification. I recommend you if you at least understand. And every time that I had a discussion about okay, should I use Spring or Jakarta EE?
Oh, that
Guess
is
what?
classic.
Guess what? Spring use Jakarta EE. Spring Data JPA. JPA is a specification under Jakarta. Spring Boot. Spring Boot uses servlets. And guess what? Servlets is a specification in Jakarta EE word. So right now, everything is Spring is around specification. That's why Pivotal, the company who supports Spring, is on the Jakarta EE membership. So there is no way to go through so far from the specification word, especially
Otavio, and it's like
documentation.
I told you, like if you know the basics, like if you go to the actual example, like auto wired and inject, we're talking about CDI. Do you know CDI? Do you know what you can do with
Yes.
CDI? So how can you do with pure Jakarta EE? How can you do it with Spring, for example? So that's kind of how you look at things, right? So that's why we are telling you, do not try to be experts only on the specific framework, but try to know what's behind it.
Yes, especially if you want to go to this area, right? So not
Eh,
everybody should,
yeah.
for example, advocate, maybe technical writing, maybe don't need, but if you go straight to technical area, engineer area, is interesting if you know more about it.
Otavio, but that's interesting that you just mentioned because, for example, I know several technical writers at Red Hat, for example. I personally know them. And the things they have to write, they get the functionality. They have some sort of documentation from the engineer who actually coded it, but they need to explain the architecture, how to use it. So they have to kind of understand what's going on there too. So, even on the documentation team. And now that we've talked about documentation, guess what? Documentation is software. Don't. I know many of you are like rolling your eyes now. Oh my gosh, documentation. Yeah, this is our fourth topic. This is one of the things you should master in order to be
Come
outstanding.
on, Karina. It's not
Those are the
possible.
small differences that make you like distinguished from the others, you know. So, Otavio, I myself, like me myself, I myself, I like to write on my blog even things that doesn't have to do with my specific area. For example, once I wrote a blog on how you can convert ASCII dog to Markdown. And that's specific. That's exactly why, like everything I need to remember, I'll forget. So whenever I have to do something, I can just go there and copy and paste. Oh, but I have my private notes here. In the like for the Windows users, I have my notepad with full of notes here on my Evernote, whatever you use. So why not share? Let's talk about this in a second. So first of
Yes.
all, new hires, documentation for new hires. Is that one of the things you should prioritize?
Yes, the onboard process, right? Especially both of us are open source developers, so we need to make a code that's able to everybody inside or outside the company is able to compile and use. And it's a real life, right, guys? New people are coming, new people are leaving, retiring. This kind of thing happened the old days. So
Mhm.
So you need to have at least a good documentation. Otherwise, the fault tolerance on your uh, organization is not software, but people. So okay, this guy is leaving. It trust me, it happened. I saw this happen a couple of times. This person is leaving. It just this person knows how to handle that technology. And as soon this person left, and on Friday, the chaos started on Monday because nobody knew that software component does exist, and the huge headache around the organization.
I've seen an example like this, but it was on public sector, and this consultant was not available anymore. And they had the production stopped for 3 weeks until they could get the guy for like paying price of gold so that he could fix the problem. So if they had the proper documentation, they might not have gone through this, right? So also, another thing is that documentation shows people how we got to the stage where we are. Especially if we are talking about senior people and architects, when we go into a company, we look at the actual implementation and we say, "Oh my gosh, what a mess! What a mess! Who did this and why did they do this? Like this is how it should have been done. Why is it done like this?" So if you had the proper documentation and the context for those decisions, that would not be a problem. And we know how technology goes and software delivery goes. So it's always important to have all those documented. And also what we learned and which errors we can avoid. So all of these are pretty valid. So we
Yes,
need
I
to
mean
demystify
mistakes
something
happen,
that
right?
mm,
And the main goal
a
is to
lot.
avoid that mistake can happen twice or three times or four times.
Otávio, but the clean code book, oh my gosh, the clean code book says comments are a great example of something that seems like a good thing, but turned out to cause more harm than good. So documenting the code with comments is this statement, it can be seen as if comments are a bad thing.
Um, Usually people use this paragraph out of the context, right? So yes, if you go to the book, you look just one paragraph, you're right. But usually it's not the right way to do, right? So you need to read the entire book to understand what's going on inside.
Yeah.
Uh, and yes, if you try to compensate the complexity of your code, put comments, it's not good. However, it does not mean that you should not write code. So, or write comments in your code, documentation, README, any kind of information. So please forget about that. Like the main black said, right? So the clean code is an excellent book, is an awesome book that has several advice to you to write a decent code closer to the business. But if you look just one paragraph, you're probably reading the book wrongly.
Otávio, so an example of comment that is actually causing more harm than good are the getters and setters, and then you just comment get name, and then like it's the method get name, set
Yes,
name, and the
exactly.
method set name, right?
Or the hero code, right? So you
Real
create it
code,
like you do a
Hadouken.
Hadouken, yes, and then put a comment. So, okay, why I'm writing, just me and God knows the code, but after that, just God knows. And so you need to write a decent code and also write a decent documentation because documentation, as I said before, belongs to the code. So, okay, don't put a comment inside this code, but self-documented code does not exist. So yes, you should write a decent code, DDD, DSL, clean code, ambiguous. I usually say it's right.
Ubiquitous.
Ubiquitous. Thank you, Karina. Uh, is important, but you should not forget about the documentation, right, Karina?
Yes, definitely. So as you've seen so far, there are different types of documentation. Okay, so there's the software documentation where you can have the code for the users. So the user's guide, how will they use your software? Maybe that's not part of your job. Okay, that's fine. But there are some others that are definitely part of our jobs. For example, creating a proper README so people can know what this software is for, especially when talking about open source. That's the first place I go, to be honest. When I'm learning about a project, I hardly go to the web page. I definitely go to the GitHub page and I go to the README. And when I want to contribute to an open source software, I need to know how to contribute. What are the guidelines there? What is the process that these folks usually follow? Pull requests. Does it have a specific name pattern? Does it have to have a Jira associated with it somewhere? Because there are there are some specific projects that they have open project management, let's put it like that. We have the issues, we know the features that are coming and that are being worked on, and it's open for the public. And many of these times, these have to be linked with the software. So all of this stuff needs to be documented also, for example, in a contributor guideline, if you are creating open source software. Now, if you are creating, let's say I don't work with open source, I only have my internal stuff, it's private. Still, you need to have developer guides. Like, what are the frameworks available for our developers in case you have let's say you have a strict line to follow on that specific group? What is there to use? How they should use it? And what should they not do there? What are the repositories? So there are many things you can have on the developer guides. APIs, Otávio. I know you love Open API. Can you talk a little bit about this?
Yes. If you are old like me, you probably worked with SOAP, where we had WSDL, right? So you do the stub, import, stuff like that. And basically, the Open API is a standard documentation to your API. Basically, you are able to import using Open API to any language that you are using. So exactly like SOAP did in the past. So it's a decent way. We also are able to integrate that with Swagger, where you have the option to put several documentation, several styles, this kind of thing. So yes, the Open API is also a standard where several companies are implementing this idea.
Yeah,
But
especially when we're talking about more complex architecture, when you start having several versions of APIs. So that might be really critical on distributed systems. And before we move ahead, just one last example is that even this software the documentation of a software has its own documentation. So this is an example from the documentation, like the open source documentation of the Druze and JBPM projects. It's open source, it's on GitHub. The documentation, the source code for the documentation is open and it's documented. So the documentation also needs documentation. So that's how far it can get. And it doesn't stop on the code level. It doesn't stop on the user's guide. We need to talk about architecture documentation, please.
yeah, especially because it's a boring code, nobody will be able to see. But it's important to know us to understand how the organization works. And for example, the C4 model is really, really important to us, especially because it's the organizational way to integrate everything. So the best way to think about C4 model is with uh, this map. So the best analogy that I have on my mind right now is a Google Maps where I start with the planet. There's no flat, by the way, and then go deep in the continent and the country and the state and city until your house.
Otávio, once
Okay.
in a whiteboarding course, a group of experts were asked to draw an architecture for a specific solution. The same solution was described and people were drawing the architecture. Boxes everywhere, arrows, users, like all sorts of different stuff. And if you're just drawing boxes to describe your architecture, you might be falling into a trap, because you know what's there, but maybe other people don't. So that's why adopting models, well-established models like the C4 is something good. So there is a documentation out there, there's videos teaching how to use it, and I've used it personally to explain complex architectures of Red Hat software, uh, for high-level people, high-level users, and also for more deep technical people. So I could go through the top view until the most complex details of the implementation.
Yes, and
Uh,
let's move on to the next one, Tech Radar. The idea of the Tech Radar is to exactly map the technology that you are using or your organization is using right now. So you're able to see the one it is core, the one it is not core, the one that we are starting to looking at. It is kind of thing, right? So basically, the organization, the the tech radar one is basically to know exactly what technology we are using as organization, and that's a nice way to
Octavio,
avoid
but
a
I know
thousand
you
of
have created,
technologies.
like you have personally created two tech raters for two different companies. How hard is it to actually create one? And did you actually get value, like good value, good return from the implementation there?
Yes, indeed, I have this one here that belongs to Zoop Innovation, the open source team. Uh, and it has a huge value, especially because right now everybody knows what tools the whole organization is using. For example, I want to use a message queue. Right now, I have the option to check if there is a message queue available that somebody else is my using. And that is good, right? So right now, for example, if everybody is using, I don't know, Apache Kafka, I already have this knowledge of operation. I have the knowledge how to use. I have the libraries. I have the whole validations. And
Maybe
if it
even
makes sense,
subscriptions.
yes, subscriptions, the whole idea, the whole everything. And if it makes sense, I might use as well. So it will decrease the curve of learning because there are a team who knows that, and the operation team knows to handle this kind of details. Okay.
Hmm. And one of the things that we've mentioned is that we need to know how we got here to the point that we are, and that's where the architecture decision record, also known as ADR, can help us out.
Yes, because you documented the whole decision. It's more the strategic one. So okay, I will use this because of that. I will use that because of this, and move on. The whole idea of architecture decision record is okay. I'm gonna use. You don't need to put the small details like okay, I'm gonna use Hibernate version 1.0 or something like that. Okay, I'm gonna use relational database in Java, and then you explain why you are doing that, and then move
Especially for
forward to the
more
next step.
complex decisions, right? There are more complex
Yes.
decisions like, why are you using operators to deliver your software instead of Helm charts, for example? So there are some complex stuff that really needs to be documented so that you have the history there and you can learn from the mistakes and not repeat them again. So our last topic, Otavio. Oh my gosh, do
Oh.
people think that when they join this career, they only need to deal with computers? So I only handle my black and green screen. That's it. I don't need to handle people. Well, if you're targeting a higher position, you will have to. That's not an option, because in the end of the day, technology is just the means to an end. Which end?
Yes. And that's hurts, right? Especially to us because we love technology. Ah, okay, let's put everything together. But if it does not make impact in your organization, it's a useless technology. Let's face it.
especially if you want to go with something just because it's cool, and in the end of the day it's just so hard to use or so hard to maintain that it's just not bringing up the value. So what about this book, Otavio? Why is it highlighted here?
Oh, it's an Italian one, I principi. So usually it says the means is not the end, right? So okay, who cares about the means if I have the end? We don't need to be so extreme
Ooh,
on that idea, but
ooh.
in general, yes, the technology is a mean to an end, right? For example, internet banking, the Java is just a mean. It's not nobody gonna
Yes,
use the internet banking because it has Java. They
exactly.
you use to facilitate or make the life easier in operation because they don't need to go to a line, something like that. They're gonna
Yeah.
use Netflix to watch movies if not go to the blockbusters. They're not gonna use because it's Java. They're
And we
gonna
went
use
through
Twitter and
through
so on, right?
a recent change in Brazil's banking transactions, where they added a new way of a form of transaction, and the technology was just the means. Like if they are using event driven or Kafka, it's just the means. What was the goal? The end goal was just to have a same way for people to do free transactions, and that it's instant, and then you can roll back and whatever all the requirements there. And then we come on board, we, the tech folks, and say, okay, so we need event driven in the Kafka, blah, 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 event streaming. But how will you know if that suits if you're not working closely with the business team? Otavio, the users are not the enemy.
Oh, unfortunately, right. Yes, user is not an enemy. Indeed, he's the person who pays your bill. Because if you create a product that there's no user and there is no stakeholder and you have a product that there's no client, you probably need to find another job.
Oh, this
Or you
is
don't
very
need to
funny.
work.
Everybody is like enemy. So ah,
Yes.
programmers are not in peace with anyone. So we need to break down the silos and put together all the things that we've learned through all the conferences, all the stuff about agile, DDD, and DevOps, all the cultural changes, all the methodology. The way to apply that is to break down the silos. This might sound um, cliche, but that's really a practice that is required. And we are going through something similar inside Red Hat right now. So that I'm living that on the past through the past year, and we are going through several changes internally because we are breaking down the silos so that we can actually deliver what we want. So I'm seeing that in a large scale now, and I actually see that it works, and it's definitely required, definitely a must.
Yes, and I love this one here because it has the flow to a cloud or cloud era, right? Because you want to deliver it more faster. It doesn't mean to deliver fast. That means you're gonna deliver everything at some single time. You need to decrease the complexity, do small step, do continuous integrations, put your code closer to the business. They
And
choose
there are
wise
several ways to
pieces.
do that.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, you said pull the code closer to the business. There are several ways to do that. Just to add to that topic, so you can, for example, not only use DDD to have a same language pattern across the communication with the business folks. You can even include different standards like BPMN or CMMN or DMN into your software so that you can create executable decisions or processes or workflows, whatever it is, that is actually represented in a graphical way that they can see it and change it and maintain it and validate it. And since it is executable, it can run as code. So there are several ways to bring the business people closer, including into, for example, the delivery pipeline, the delivery cycle. They might want to be part of the any approval processes if there are any. And how can they do that if they don't understand anything that's in there? Like WSAPP.war. What is that? Oh my gosh. So you need to think about it. Yeah. So is there
Yes.
anything else you would like to add on this topic, Otavio?
Yes. No, I'm kidding. Thank you, everybody. Hopefully, you enjoyed this presentation. Please follow her on Twitter, Key
Follow
Varela.
him also.
Instead of A is four. So she has several tips, several articles, several knowledge. It's valuable and affordable to use and understand. And yes, let's connect. So she also has LinkedIn, probably I don't know.
We have. And please let's
Yes,
connect. We are always doing, we love working together. So you might see several works from us, talks, blog posts, books, and things.
and
We are
free
always
books.
working.
Yes,
Yeah, we believe that summing up our experiences is the best way to bring value to the audience. So thank you so much for your time. Thanks for attending and thanks for having us.
Thank you for that excellent presentation today, Karina and Otavio. It's just a great reminder. If anyone in the audience has any final questions, please feel free to ask in the chat and or use the Ask the Questions tab, and I'll give you a few moments to do that. But while I wrap up, the next Jakarta Tech Talk happens on March 30th, the Piranha Cloud, a new EEMP runtime in progress. You can register for that session using the link I just posted in the chat. Let me just click on there. Get that in there for you guys. And then we're also looking to book some more Jakarta Tech Talks throughout 2022. So if you're interested in presenting, feel free to fill out the form, which I will also link in the chat. And finally, if you have any feedback on the Tech Talk program, we would love to hear from you. So just click the green button that popped up and let us know how you enjoyed the talk. Doesn't look like there's any other questions, so we are good to
There's just
go.
one thing. Someone asked if this was being recorded.
Yes,
I'll ask. Yes, it's being recorded, right? Okay, good.
exactly.
Thank
And
you.
we'll be sharing it with everyone through the social channels.
Awesome. Thank you so much,
Perfect.
everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone. Take care.
bye
Bye.
bye.
Bye.